Hello, America and the world. This is Radio Free Market, and I'm your host, Michael McKay. We are behind the lines of socialism, my friends, and Radio Free Market is the voice of free people and free markets. Our topic today is Radicals for Peace, Prosperity, and Freedom, answering 10 objections to Libertarian Anarchism with Dr. Roderick Long. Welcome, Roderick.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Very, very happy to have you on with us today. So, folks, Dr. Long is a professor of philosophy at Auburn University. He's the editor of the Libertarian Nation Foundation periodical Formulations, and he is an adjunct scholar at the Ludwig von Mises Institute. We also have Radio Free Market show producer and co-host, Mr. Luke McGraw. Welcome, Luke.
Hi, Michael. How's it going?
Excellent. Well, I'm happy to have you as well. So we're going to start in a very interesting way with this show, because this is certainly going to be a very interesting conversation. And Roderick, again, thank you for being here. Before we get on to the 10 objections to libertarian anarchism, I put in the promo for this show that we have on our website that we would start by asking you, what's wrong with a shoe monopoly? So let's start with that question. What is wrong with a shoe monopoly?
Okay, so let's imagine that I have been granted by government a special legal privilege that I and my gang or my family or people I approve of are the only ones who are allowed to manufacture and sell shoes. If you try to set up a shoe factory or a shoe shop without signing up with me, then we go to the government and have them put you out of business, or we come and put you out of business ourselves, whatever. Mm-hmm. So the question is, why would this be a bad idea? And there are several reasons, but I think there are three that come to mind foremost. So first, there's just a moral problem with it. Where do I get the right to claim this monopoly? Why should I be the only one allowed to manufacture and sell shoes? Why shouldn't people be allowed to compete with me? Even if the system had fine results, didn't run into any bad consequences, it still just seems a kind of effrontery for me to be able to claim this privilege just for myself and my friends. So there's that moral objection. Then there's what you might call an incentival objection, which is this system is going to give me and my shoe monopoly some bad incentives, because I'm going to first of all, I'm not going to have much of an incentive to keep prices low. After all, ordinarily, if I sell very expensive shoes and you can find comparable shoes somewhere else for a cheaper price, you'll go to them, not to me. But if I'm the only one in town allowed to sell shoes, then you've got to meet my price or go barefoot. And so, as long as you prefer shoes at my price to going barefoot, you'll come to me. So I'm going to have an incentive to have high-priced shoes. I'm also going to have an incentive not to have very high-quality shoes, or not to be very concerned with exactly what kinds of shoes my customers prefer. As long as what I'm offering them is something they prefer to going barefoot, they will still come to me. And so, if I'm, to the extent that I'm driven by economic self-interest here, I don't have much of an incentive to keep prices low or to keep quality high or to have any interest in what my consumers want. It also puts me in a kind of bad power position.
Well, that's what I was actually going to go to there, is that you've got a quality issue, you've got abuse of power issues, and there are special problems with these forced monopolies, and particularly when it's applied to government. Now, we only have about 30 seconds for you to answer this question, but could you clarify this term anarchist? You don't mean violence and chaos, right?
Right. Anarchy simply means not having a monopoly over the protection and enforcement of rights.
No, I think that's a very nice definition. I like that one very much. So, well, folks, we're going to come into the end of this particular segment, and when we come back, we're going to go into these 10 objections to libertarian anarchism with Dr. Roderick Long. And so please stay with us. This is Radio Free Market, and I have Dr. Roderick Long from the Auburn University, as well as Luke McGraw with us today. And so when we come back, we will get into this and many other issues. So stay with us. We'll be right back. And welcome back, everyone. This is Radio Free Market. And so, Luke, please go ahead with the first objection to libertarian anarchism.
All right, cool. The first one is a social contract type argument. So people will often say that a government's not a coercive monopoly, that we choose to live wherever we are that's being ruled by a government, or at least we choose to remain there. What would you say to that kind of something like that, Professor Long?
Yeah, well, I think there are two problems with that argument. One is I don't think it's true that we have consented to government. And second, I think that even if we had, that still wouldn't be a good argument for it. So let me start with the first problem. Clearly, most of us have never officially consented by, signing a document or swearing or anything like that, but the argument's often given, well, by staying within the country and accepting the protection of its services or whatever, you've thereby consented. But the problem, I think, is that argument tends to presuppose the very thing it's trying to prove, namely the legitimacy of government's rule over this territory. Because if you say, when you visit someone's house, you have to abide by their rules while you're there, you're implicitly agreeing to do that. So likewise, when you live in a country, you're agreeing blah, blah, blah. Well, that assumes that the country is something like, the government is something like the owner of that country. I suppose I just say, well, by living within 1,000 miles of me, you've thereby agreed to my authority, or by benefiting from me by, reading my blog or something, you've thereby, consented. Well, what gives me authority over that, that 1,000-mile radius that entitles me to say that? Also, people say people have consented by voting, but you vote when you do to get rid of the more objectionable persons, like saying, well, would you rather be beaten, once a day or twice a day? So you vote for the once a day guy. Say, aha, well, you've thereby consented to being beaten. Well, not really. But moreover, even if we had consented, it still wouldn't be, it wouldn't be a good system, because if we have a monopoly, they're going to abuse power. They're going to have low quality services and high prices for the reasons I just mentioned with the shoe company. And also, an additional problem that also applies to the shoe company is, even if you manage to get saints running the thing, who can be trusted not to abuse their power and abuse their monopoly position, still without competition, they're not going to have a very good idea what kind of services people want, be it shoes or rights protection.
Right.
If I've got the shoe monopoly and I ask my customers, how do you like my shoes? Well, what do they compare them with? Compare them with going barefoot? Yeah, I guess we like them okay, they say. Without a price system, without competition, I have no form of feedback to tell me, are there other ways of doing this that are more effective? And likewise, if I'm the government, if I'm imposing this system on everyone, even if my intentions are good, it's hard for me to have any reliable feedback as to what I'm doing.
I'm going to insert myself here that Dr. Yermoltsev makes the point that in the Soviet Union, they manufactured more shoes than any other country in the world, except that there was always a shortage of shoes, and there was only a couple of styles, and of course there were a lot of the wrong sizes. And so people got what they got if they could get in line and get what they could get, because it was people would get 10 pairs of shoes or 5 pairs of shoes, and they would be the wrong size for them and colors they didn't like and things of that nature. So this information problem is a very important aspect to the problems with monopolies. Yeah. So,
all right.
Please, Luke, go ahead.
Let me continue. All right, cool. The second objection is that government intervention is needed for social cooperation. So I know that Thomas Hobbes, the 17th century English philosopher, said that in the absence of a sovereign, in absence of a strong and powerful government, society would degenerate into a war of all against all. So we need to have a government because that allows us to have social cooperation. They provide us with law and order, and they punish people who try and cheat or steal or hurt others. What do you think of Hobbes's argument?
Yeah, well, Hobbes had this argument that without government, your cooperation isn't going to be stable because no one has any reason to expect the other person to keep their side of the agreement. So if I pay you $10 today to deliver some good to me tomorrow, without government to enforce that agreement, I've got no reason to expect you won't just run off with my $10, and so I don't give you my $10, and so then we're both worse off. I don't get whatever it is I wanted from you, you don't get the $10, and so forth. But there's a problem with this argument, which is if you really needed centralized enforcement in order to bring about social cooperation, then how could government ever come into existence in the first place? After all, government is itself a large, complex form of social cooperation. And the people who run the government don't have superpowers. It's not through their super strength that the leaders of the government get everyone cooperating. The leaders of the government are outnumbered by the rest of the government, which in turn is outnumbered by the rest of us. It can't be just their own personal might and force that makes everyone cooperate. As a matter of fact, there are plenty of incentives to cooperate, because after all, you're not just interacting with this person just once. If you're going to interact with me once and then I'll never see you again, then maybe we have reason to treat each other. But if it's going to be ongoing and if other people are watching, there are reputation effects. Mm-hmm. In fact,
and then, of course, you had this the whole conversation about from Hobbes that there can't be any law unless it's enforced by physical force. But there were law merchants in the late Middle Ages.
The law merchant would operate precisely on this reputation basis. And I think that there are legitimate, forcible ways of enforcing the law without government as well. But it's also true that in many cases you don't even need force. The law merchant evolved because the government courts were not enforcing international agreements. Each court wanted to apply its own rules, and so they couldn't agree with about any contracts made with another country. And so the merchants all got together and created this system where anyone who didn't abide by these voluntary courts would be boycotted, and it was very effective.
And even
we're going to be doing it. Please
go
ahead.
Sorry, Mark. I was just going to say that even if we did have to have the law enforced by physical force, it doesn't have to necessarily be carried out by a monopolist, because there was medieval Iceland as an example, isn't it?
Yes, in medieval Iceland, from around 930 to 1260, they had a system where the chief form of law enforcement, if you want to call it that, were these chieftains. But the chieftain's territory was not geographic. So you could quit your chieftain and sign up with a different chieftain without moving to a different location. So there was no geographical monopoly. They had genuine competition. And the system worked amazingly well, in the sense that when Iceland started off, it was a blood feud culture where if you offended me, then I would kill your brother, and then your other brother would kill my brother, and so on, back and forth. And gradually this got tamed, and people became willing to accept, even these Viking types became willing to accept economic restitution rather than violence and so forth. And so, if this kind of non-monopolistic legal system can make Vikings cooperate, it really should be able to make anyone cooperate.
I think that's an excellent example, and I would like to refer people to an article that's available on LouRockwell.com. If you go to Roderick Long's archives, the name of the article is Privatization, Viking Style, Model or Misfortune. It's an excellent article that brings out this particular point, so I would recommend that very highly to our listeners. So, Roderick, objection number 3 comes from John Locke, another 17th century philosopher whose ideas greatly influenced the founding fathers of America. Would you be able to tell us what his 3 inconveniences of anarchy, which we like to call peaceful cooperative society, were, and why you don't find his argument very compelling?
Sure. Okay, so Locke was more optimistic about cooperation without government than Hobbes was. That's one reason he was less scared of revolution than Hobbes was. But Locke did think there were 3 serious problems. One is he thought that there wouldn't be a known and settled law. He thought that people could figure out, without government, some very basic principles, that people have the right to run their own lives and they have the right to keep the fruits of their labor and so forth. But when it comes to applying those in particular cases, you've got you've got a stream running from your land onto mine, and then you dam it, and then I complain you're violating my property rights because my stream is dried up, and you claim no, you're not, because you just did it on your property. You can see how reasonable people who all accepted libertarian property rights could disagree about exactly how to handle these situations. So Locke says, look, you need some organized, settled, known ahead of time body of law, and that's what you need government for. Second, he said, the problem with state of nature is that people are going to be judges in their own case. If I've got a dispute with you, there's no government to go to, I'll just resolve it on my own. I'll decide In fact, I'll be judge, jury, and executioner. I'll decide you've violated my rights. I will decide on the appropriate remedy and so forth. The problem is people tend to be biased in their own favor, and so that's not going to work out too well. And finally, you're not going to have adequate organized enforcement, because although you and your neighbors getting together to deal with some the occasional individual criminal might work, if you have sort of more organized larger bodies of criminals, you need some kind of organized enforcement. Therefore, you need government.
You make this excellent point that I want to bring out, that it seems like stateless cooperation solves all three of these problems, which actually the state cannot solve.
That's right. I think that Locke thought he was giving an argument for government. In fact, he was giving an argument for, I'd say, a legal system. But not only is government not needed for any of those things, but in particular, government can't properly supply them at all. Take, for example, I think this is clearest in the case of the second one, the problem of people being judges in their own case. Now, I think it's a good principle that if you have a dispute with someone, where possible, leaving aside emergencies, situations, and so forth, you shouldn't just resolve it yourself. You should appeal to a third-party neutral arbiter. But it doesn't mean there has to be some one single for all of society third-party arbiter to whom everyone submits their disputes. In fact, if there is, then you've got a violation of the principle, because if you have a dispute with that entity, there's no third-party arbiter for it to submit its disputes to. If you have a dispute with the government, sure, there's, if the government has division of powers, that makes it a little bit better. But still, if you have a dispute with the government, it's going to be resolved by some branch of the government. And that's
okay. We're going to have to break in here. We're going to have to break in here and take a break. We're going to talk more about this when we come back. So everyone, please stay with us. This is Radio Free Market, and I'm your host, Michael McKay, and we'll be back in just a minute. Please stay with us. And welcome back, everyone. This is Radio Free Market. And Luke, let's get going with objection number 4.
All right, cool. This is one comes from Ayn Rand, who's made, amongst other people, she said that if we had private protection agencies providing security instead of government police, that these private protection agencies will fight each other. There'll be a lot of battles going on. So suppose, Roderick, that you and I were to get into a dispute and we both subscribe to different protection agencies, wouldn't these protection agencies then just fight each other?
Well, the thing is that private protection agencies have more of an incentive than governments do to resolve their disputes peacefully. And here's why. War is expensive. Now, if you're a government, you can afford to go to war because you've got a captive customer base, the taxpayers, and you can just extract the money from them, or print money or whatever. You've got other monopolies too. Anyway, your monopolistic power enables you to foot the bill off onto someone else. Whereas if you are a private protection agency, you have a choice of trying to resolve the dispute by arbitration or to go to war. If you go to war, the monthly premiums you send out to your customers are going to go up. And the customers are going to look at this and say, wow, so I spent this amount on protection against burglary and this huge amount on warfare against protection agencies B, C, and D. Like, yeah, can I switch? Can I switch my service? And if you have the right to switch your service, then it's imagine how hard it would be for the U.S. government to prosecute its wars in Iraq and Afghanistan if people could just look at their at the breakdown of their monthly bill and say, yeah, can I switch to some agency that isn't doing that?
I think people will often, they might cheer on and say that they do support a war, but perhaps I think that if they, that's right, could choose to not pay for it, I think many of those people might change their minds.
Right.
Yeah, there are many things we might support, but we're not going to be willing to foot the bill for them ourselves.
Yeah, that's right. All right, objection number 5 to libertarian anarchism is that in a society without a government, there would be no final arbiter of disputes. So it's possible today to take a dispute all the way to the Supreme Court, but no such thing would exist, though, in a stateless society. So wouldn't disputes then just go on and on? There'd be no way to resolve them?
Well, it depends what a final arbiter means. If a final arbiter means something that absolutely guarantees that the dispute cannot be further pursued, then I don't think any system has that. I mean, our system doesn't have that. If I appeal my case to the Supreme Court and I lose, well, I can lobby the Congress. I can try to get them to change the law, or I can try and get the Constitution amended, or I can try and vote for or get other people to vote for politicians who will change the law, or I can try to organize a revolution, or whatever. I mean, there's always something I can do. But in practice, most of the time, most disputes get resolved because it's a pain to keep pushing them. And in that sense, if by final arbiter you mean something that realistically leads to disputes finally petering out, well, governments can do that, but anarchies can do that too. And historically, if you look at cases like medieval Iceland and Anglo-Saxon England and so forth, they seem to have done so.
Yeah.
I like this particular objection, and I liked your answer to it a lot because you bring out this very key point that this sort of problem or this sort of situation, I should say, of no final arbiter exists in every society or in every system, if you will. And we did a show some time back on Somalia. And the name of the show is More Peaceful, Stateless and, quote-unquote, More Peaceful in Somalia. And it pointed out that in Somalia, by custom, if there's a dispute, then the two tribes basically hire a third tribe that makes a decision, and that becomes the final verdict. And the result of noncompliance is to become an outcast, and that's imbued into the custom of that particular area. And this is a very interesting thing that I know we don't have time to pursue very much with you today, but this concept of shunning or outcastism, if you will, I know it existed in ancient Iceland. It's existed in a lot of different cultures around the world. In the old American West, it was used to enforce rules for wagon trains and mining camps and things of that nature.
We have the equivalent now online, and things like eBay. If someone orders something from you and you don't send it, or what you send wasn't what's promised, you get a negative rating. That's like a little bit of shunning, and other people read that, and they shun you a little bit too, and then you don't get as many customers.
It's funny though. I'm sure that before eBay came online, before eBay was created, the economists would probably say that that this thing could never work because there'd be an asymmetric information problem.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Explain that term for our listeners, Luke.
Well, that's where one party knows a lot about. So if I'm selling you, let's just say, I don't know, an iron or something, I might know that it's kind of a little bit defective in a certain way, but you don't know any of this information. So one side knows a lot more than the other side. So they would say that, well, how do we resolve this, or will the trade actually take place?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that assumes, eBay works really well. The problem assumes that there's just a one-time interaction. They give you something, it's not what you expected, they run off, and there's never any more interaction. But if you can give them positive or negative ratings online, and other people can see that, then they have an incentive to correct that problem.
I think it's extremely important for us to take a look at all of these examples, both historic and current, as to how privatization of conflict resolution works and minimizes abuse of power issues and increases quality of life issues. But we're coming to the end of this particular segment, so everyone please stay with us, and we'll be right back right after the break